Hi, my name is Mayank Shekhar. My most unique achievement in life is that I watched practically all Bollywood movies, or at least 95 to 98% of them that are released in theaters from 2004 to 2017. Of course, that gives me some sort of cred to talk about Bollywood. Also, it tells you that I'm an extremely jobless person. Or maybe that's my job. I am a film critic. Here, of course, I'm going to be talking about the globalization or the lack of it so far as Bollywood is concerned. And of course, I could go into all the cliches that you've heard in the past in your life, which is about how India produces the maximum number of movies in the world. Of course, it would. India has the maximum number of languages in the world. India has 12 film industries within it. Bollywood is a subset of Indian cinema. I could also tell you about how in 2002, 3.6 billion tickets were sold for Bollywood movies, whereas that number for Hollywood was 2.6 billion. I could talk about how Bollywood's growth rate has been much higher than Hollywood in the past many years. But I think Bollywood is far more than its box office. It is far more than films also. Of course, it is about storytelling and it is about emotions, but it's also about music. It's also about locations. In fact, it has a direct impact on the tourism industry as has been established in the past. It's also about fashion. So it is about the nightlife of the young. It is about the celebrations among the old. And in my mind, it is the most dominant pop culture in the world which is not American. And why do I say that? Because I'm Indian. And there are 1.3 billion Indians who've been touched in some form or the other by Bollywood. And as an Indian, as you step outside India, the first thing you realize is someone or the other, it doesn't matter which part of the world you're in, someone or the other will tell you how they've been touched by Bollywood themselves. Now, every Indian has that story, that travel story about who they met and what the cabbie told them. Mine was a more recent one. This was, I think last year. I was going to Turkey for Christmas, and I tweeted that fact. A girl from Istanbul, which is where I was headed to, she wrote to me. She was a Bollywood fan, and she said that she wanted to meet me. She said that she wanted to show me around. We got chatting. We chatted on Twitter for at least a week to 10 days. And finally, when I landed, she was there at the airport to pick me up. I realized that she did not know a word of Hindi or English. I hung out with her and her friends. We sat in a coffee shop. We discussed stuff for many, many hours over the few days as well. And we did this through Google Translate. One of the first songs that I heard, thanks to all these people, was this one. Of course, you've heard this song before. It's from the film Jab We Met. This is the Turkish version of that track. Now, this is not how traditionally Bollywood has been known across the world. I don't know how many non-Indians know this, but for the longest, especially through to the 80s and up until the mid-90s, the upper-class Indians themselves were completely ashamed of Bollywood. They looked down upon it. And the point of my talk today is actually to prove to you that all those reasons why they looked down upon Bollywood was actually the reason for its global influence. The first reason that a lot of us sneered at Bollywood back in the day was its moral conservatism. The fact that there's so much melodrama between the father, the son and the mother, between the boy and the girl. Well, Mother India, for instance, was a huge hit also in India in 1957. According to all anecdotal evidences, Mother India remains one of the most loved films in the entire African continent. and for the same reasons. The other thing is, of course, the sexual liberation aspect of it, or the sexual conservatism in our films. We've all laughed for so many years about how the hero and the heroine make out, and suddenly this flower shows up, and that's supposed to be lovemaking. Now that in itself actually resonated with a lot of conservative societies in the world, especially in the third world, especially in Islamic societies. They saw that as being far truer to their culture than they did with the sexually liberated characters and films and stories of Hollywood. The other thing is songs. We have too many songs, is what we've complained about all through the years. The fact is, you remember songs. You may forget the films. There are known cases of huge, hardcore Bollywood buffs in Russia and the CIS countries who keep talking about Mera Juta Hai Japani, and they start singing right away. They talk about Awara Hu is supposed to be an anthem in Turkey. The third thing, and an equally important thing in my head, is the star system in Bollywood. And we've all loathed it because these are actors who are treated like gods, and everywhere you go, it's this idol-worshipping culture that we've all hated because, you know, we need to get more realistic about our cinema, you see. The fact is also that it's easier to remember stars and to project our love for Bollywood through one person. Everyone across the world, or at least most of them, know Amitabh Bachchan. In 2004, in Baghdad, a few construction mining workers were abducted by terrorists in Baghdad. And when those guys realized who these people were, Indians of course, all that they wanted for ransom was a phone call with Asha Parekh. Now, I don't know how many of you even know what Asha Parekh looks like, but those guys still remember it. Then comes the other huge aspect, and not to say that all these reasons we've decided not to like Bollywood in the 80s up until the mid-90s were not legit, but this was far more legit than that, is Hollywood rip-offs, which is where Bollywood gets its name. The fact that we stole stories that were being told by Americans and we made it our own. Now, there are numerous examples of how that can be a good thing, because what you're essentially doing is marrying East and the West. In my head, and that's my theory, I think Russia's love, to a huge extent, comes from that fact alone. You have to understand that the reason why Raj Kapoor is also huge in Russia is because in the 50s, during the Cold War, Russians were not allowed to watch Hollywood movies. 20 Indian movies could release in their theaters every year, and that's when they fell in love with Raj Kapoor to start with, but they also fell in love with the character of the tramp, which is Chaplin. Chaplin, they could not access. Raj Kapoor, they got. Up until the 80s, you'll have come across, at least if you go to any of these CIS countries, which are in Central Asia, you will find fans, hardcore fans of Jimmy, which was Mithun Chakrabarti's character in a film called Disco Dancer. Now, Disco Dancer, while it's a great film for all those who love it, was essentially a Hollywood ripoff of the disco generation that was the 80s out there. I think the Russians accessed disco through us. So that explains that the rip-offs weren't such a bad thing after all. Now, something changed in the 90s though, and it just changed for the good, which explains the Turkey I just explained to you about. And a turning point in the film, so far as one of the theories of mine is this particular one. It's not once in a while. Quite often you come across films that make you laugh, they make you cry. What was very special about this particular film, Yash Chopra's Lamhe, this happened in the 90s, is that the producers themselves had no clue that there was this movie that went abroad and did far better business than it did in India. They suddenly saw that there was a huge non-resident Indian population that was loving this stuff, whereas India had remained, in a certain way, loving the old Bollywood movies as they've always done. Now, this India that was outside was very close to the India and the upper class India that had looked down upon Bollywood for at least a decade and a half, and therefore started a whole new market. What exactly happened in the 90s again? First thing, internet. Second thing, and more importantly, in the context of this country, satellite communication. So from one channel, you had various television channels. These same television channels would be broadcast in the United States, in United Kingdom. Those films, therefore, were being accessed not just by those seeking nostalgia, which has always been the case, by the second-generation Americans, American Indians, third-generation American Indians, fourth-generation American Indians, because they were watching stories now which was also set in exactly their neighborhood. And the reason why they were doing that is because they could pay $8, they could pay £8 to watch a film that would be equal to a lot more Indians who would be paying much lesser in a single-screen theater. So you see from the mid-90s onwards, a whole influx of what is called the NRI film. And that was one phase that split Bollywood into what then became the multiplex film and the single-screen film. Now, what's a multiplex film? Multiplex film that started sometime in the 2000s was a film that could be seen in the malls, and therefore the upper-class Indians who would either watch it on VHS and therefore the money would not come to the producer, was actually going to the theater to watch a movie that would show up in the box office. What did it do to Bollywood per se? It made the upper middle class and the middle class more and more a stakeholder in the kind of films we wanted to watch. That changed completely the dimension of the kind of movies that we would catch. It was no more the same repetitive stuff which was about good versus evil. It was no more the same thing about rich boy, poor girl, poor boy, rich girl. This is something that the old Bollywood, whether in Africa or in Central Asia or West Asia, may have loved forever. But this was new Bollywood, which was being loved by NRIs, which was being loved by the upper middle classes, and that led to a split, a new one, which is a Bollywood that is far more responsive to our upper class tastes, and therefore a more globalized taste, and that explains few things. One, it explains that the new fans of Bollywood that you meet, whether in Germany, they love Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, that is their favorite film. And the reason they love it is, of course, because of the melodrama, but also because the stuff looks great. The stuff looks glitzy. The stuff looks glamorous. In the same way that the West was looking at India and would have liked to because the markets had opened up. That's another thing that happened in 1991, the economic boom, as it were, or the economic liberalization. So that's a new crowd that you see that also wants the love stories. Most of us don't know that the movie Swades is a hit in Germany, and the reason it's a hit is because they cut a new version of it and they made it into a romantic film. Most of us don't know, or did not know until now, that Bollywood is huge in Turkey. That's because they love the beats. They love a film called Three Idiots. A film like Three Idiots is about what? It's about how the education system can drub you and kill your dreams. That can be true for a lot of young people across the world. Most of us did not know until just a few months back that a film like Dangal would do close to $200 million business in China, not because they saw it as a Bollywood film, but because they saw it as a film about a girl who then makes it in sport because her father really wants her to. Most Chinese kids have to make it in sport because the communist regime wants them to. They saw a connection there. So now, coming back to where I started from, which is Damla, my friend from Istanbul. Now, after 4 or 5 days that we were there, she showed me around. She wouldn't let me pay for anything in Istanbul. She and her friends came to drop me at the airport. Great, thank you very much. I'm going home now. I walk into the immigration. I can still feel that she's probably still standing there. I turn around to check if she's still there. Very much she's looking at me. She sent me a message to say, I was waiting for Palat, Palat, Palat. Talking of Shah Rukh Khan, one of The top hits in 2011 was a song called Chamak Chalo. I'm sure all of you have heard it before. It's sung by Akon. What is so interesting about Akon singing this song is the fact that Akon is Senegalese by origin. He grew up singing Hindi songs without quite knowing the language. Then he goes to the US and he becomes a pop sensation. Then Bombay calls him to become the voice for Shah Rukh, and he sings a song in Hindi, a song in a language that he'd sung all through his life. So from Senegal to North America to India, Africa, North America, Asia. If this is not globalization, frankly speaking, ladies and gentlemen, I do not know what it is. I'll leave you with this track, of course.